An alien princess crashes to Earth, exiled for refusing to kill, and a lone human medic becomes the only one who sees her strength for what it truly is. In a world where war defines power, can mercy rewrite destiny? What begins as survival in the woods becomes a battle for the soul of a galaxy. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. The sky broke open in the middle of a quiet afternoon. Riven Astor had spent most of his life under calm skies, deep in the quiet corners of the Pacific Northwest. He wasn't a man who chased adventure. He had already seen enough of that during his years as a combat medic. Now he preferred the peaceful rustle of trees and the steady rhythm of hiking boots on dirt. But that day, the peace shattered. It began with a sound, a sharp, tearing roar that didn't belong in any forest. Riven and the two campers with him froze as a blazing object sliced across the sky, trailing fire and smoke. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a meteor either, though one of the hikers mumbled that with shaky confidence. Riven's trained ears told him otherwise. That was controlled. That thing was steering. That thing had just crashed. Without a word, he grabbed his emergency medical kit and started moving toward the distant plume of smoke. The others called after him, but he only shouted back, "Stay put. Keep the fire going. Don't wander." His boots crunched over frost-covered pine needles as he made his way through the underbrush, heart thumping with a mixture of instinct and something stranger, curiosity. The impact site wasn't far. Trees had been bent and scorched in a long trail, ending at a crater where something massive had landed. The object at the center didn't look like any aircraft he'd ever seen. It shimmered with strange metals and pulsed with fading lights. Alien. That was the only word his mind could offer. The escape pod, or whatever it was, hissed softly as a panel slid open, revealing an interior that didn't make sense. It was bigger on the inside somehow, like space bent around it. But it wasn't the strange tech that held his attention. It was her. She tumbled out of the pod like starlight-made flesh. Her skin was a cool blue, her hair a cascade of electric strands that moved like a living river. Her armor clung to her like it had been poured onto her body, slick and seamless. Her eyes were closed, her breath shallow. A line of silver blood traced a path down her temple. Riven froze for a second, staring. Then his training kicked in. He dropped to his knees beside her and checked her pulse. Alive, cold, but not dangerously so. Her skin was warmer than it should have been, given the snow around her. Carefully, he opened his kit and started assessing her injuries, speaking softly, even though he wasn't sure she could understand. "You're hurt, let's fix that." Her eyes fluttered open, deep pools of violet and gold. They locked on his, and for a moment they held the same expression he'd seen in soldiers waking from trauma. Fear, disorientation, and shame. She pushed herself back, her body tense despite the injuries. "Stay back, Primitive," she said, her voice musical but firm. Then softer. "I am nothing you need to fear." "You're bleeding," Riven said calmly. "That's all I need to know." "You know nothing of what I am," she hissed, one hand moving to a jagged shard of metal sticking out from her side, "or what I've failed to do." "I know pain," he replied, gently reaching for the wound. "I know survival. And I know if we stay out here too long, we're both going to freeze." Something in his tone made her pause. She stopped retreating and watched him with guarded eyes, letting him inch closer. "You would help me?" she asked quietly. "Knowing I am not of your kind?" "I've patched up everyone from fellow medics to people trying to kill me," Riven said, giving a small, dry smile. "Species doesn't matter. Bleeding is bleeding." Her lips parted, revealing teeth a bit too sharp. "My people are warriors," she whispered. "We conquer. We take. I was cast out for failing to kill. In our final trial, I spared a prisoner, a boy." He didn't say anything for a moment, just worked. Cleaning silver blood, bandaging wounds. "Sounds like you did the right thing," he said finally. I defied the law. I was supposed to kill him. I couldn't. So they sent me away. To die? He asked. To learn? She whispered bitterly. Or to disappear? I suppose either. Outcome was acceptable. Well, you're not dying today, Riven said firmly. Not while I'm here. She looked at him then, truly looked. Her gaze softened, and something unfamiliar flickered in those alien eyes. My name is Selah, she said after a pause. Daughter of House Corrin, the weakest of my kind. Nice to meet you, Selah, Riven said as he helped her sit up. I'm Riven, former army medic, part-time wilderness guide, and for the record, I don't think you're weak. I think you're stronger than anyone who's ever picked violence just because it was easier. Snow started to fall again, soft and silent. Around them, the forest was still, but something between them had shifted, something important. As Riven helped Selah to her feet, the crash site behind them continued to smolder. Neither of them noticed the faint hum as the alien pod powered down for good, its mission complete. The sky had fallen in silence, but it had delivered something extraordinary, and this was only the beginning. The morning after the crash was still and bitterly cold. A faint mist clung to the trees as sunlight filtered through the branches, casting long shadows over the snow. Riven stirred the fire with a stick, checking the flames while his other hand held a dented tin mug filled with lukewarm coffee. Across from him, wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag, Selah sat staring into the flames. Her eyes were distant, but not cold, more like she was listening to memories no one else could hear. The blue of her skin glowed faintly in the firelight, soft and strange. Riven didn't press her with questions. He knew what it felt like to wake up in a world you no longer recognized. Instead, he poured a little of his coffee into a spare cup and handed it to her. She looked at it, confused, then raised it slowly to her lips. Her expression barely changed, though she muttered, "It tastes like engine oil." Riven chuckled. That's how you know it's working. They didn't speak much that morning. Selah seemed stronger but still guarded. Her movements were graceful but cautious, like she wasn't sure what part of her might give out next. When she finally stood stretching carefully, Riven noticed how her eyes scanned the woods, alert, focused. We're running low on food, he said. Emergency rations won't get us through another day or two. We'll need to find something. I can hunt, she said quickly. Let me prove my worth. Before Riven could reply, she had already turned and vanished into the trees, her body moving like wind through branches, silent, fluid, wild. He followed, keeping a slower pace, watching where her trail led. She was fast, no question. In less than 15 minutes, he caught up to her crouched in the snow, staring at an elk that had wandered into a small clearing. Her muscles tensed, her fingers flexed. It should have been easy. But she didn't move. Instead, her hands began to tremble. The elk raised its head slightly, sensing her presence. Selah didn't strike. She stepped back, then again. Finally, she turned and disappeared behind a thicket. Riven waited until the elk was gone, then found her sitting on a fallen log, hands clenched in her lap, face turned away. I couldn't do it, she said softly. Again. You didn't have to, Riven replied, easing down beside her. It's okay. No, it's not, she said, her voice harsh. My people, we are hunters, fighters, killers. I can't even do what a child would be trained to do without hesitation. He glanced at her, then at the snow around them. Well, it just so happens I have a backup plan. He led her to a nearby stream he'd found earlier, where slow-moving water bubbled beneath a thin sheet of ice. From his pack, Riven pulled out a small fishing line and hook fashioned from old wire. He dug around for a few grubs under a nearby log and baited the hook. Selah watched with interest, though her expression still carried shame. Fishing? She asked. This is survival? It's food, Riven answered simply, and it doesn't fight back with big brown eyes. Within minutes, he'd caught 2 fish. Not huge, but enough for a meal. He taught Selah how to clean them, how to slice and gut and rinse, and though her fingers were far too precise for a beginner, she followed along in silence. As they cooked the fish over the fire, she stared at the flames again. "I don't understand you," she said. "You survive with gentleness. You treat your enemies. You teach others to endure, not to dominate. Why?" Riven shrugged. "Because sometimes people need care more than they need correction." They ate quietly, the fish flaking apart in warm bites. Sayla seemed more relaxed, though still troubled. She reached for a cluster of nearby berries, edible ones Riven had shown her, and their hands brushed. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You helped me," she said finally, "without knowing anything about me, without reason." "Because you needed help," he answered. That was reason enough. She stared at him with a look he couldn't quite place. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "I was told mercy is a weakness, that it gives enemies a chance to strike back stronger." Riven leaned back, arms behind him. "Sometimes that's true, but sometimes mercy creates something new, a second chance, a different path." The wind whispered through the trees, soft and cold. Sayla pulled her coat tighter. "Where I come from, strength is a weapon. But here, it feels like strength is something else. Patience, empathy, safety." "Strength takes a lot of forms," Riven said. "But the best kind, it makes other people feel safe." She didn't respond, but she leaned just slightly closer to the fire, and a little closer to him. They sat that way until the sky turned dim and the stars began to show between the trees. Sayla spoke again only once before sleep. "I don't know what kind of world you live in," Riven asked her, "but I think it's teaching me how to be something better." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The fire crackled beside them, warm and steady, holding back the dark, and somewhere in the woods the elk walked safely away, still alive as if it too had been spared by something unexpected. The storm came not from the sky above, but from beyond the stars. It began early in the morning, just as the snow from the night before began to melt. Riven was gathering firewood, and Sayla was quietly boiling water over the campfire, her eyes soft and thoughtful. Their days had become a quiet rhythm, surviving, sharing, understanding. But that fragile calm shattered when a low, vibrating hum spread through the forest. The ground trembled. Birds took flight in a frenzy. Trees shook like something massive had passed overhead. Sayla stood up fast, her breath catching. "They're here," she whispered. Riven turned, axe in hand, staring toward the horizon where dark shapes moved in the sky. He didn't recognize the design, but he knew the feeling, military, aggressive, ready for war. "Your people?" he asked. She nodded. Her face had changed, no longer soft, no longer warm. Her posture straightened and the glow of her skin deepened as her armor activated. It reformed around her with a hum, like the exhale of something ancient. "They've come to collect me, or to judge me." From the edge of the clearing, a bright blue hologram sparked to life. It hovered in the air, tall and sharp and full of authority. The figure that appeared was clearly alien, regal and cold, but her features were unmistakably related to Sayla. "Daughter," the hologram said. Sayla stiffened. "Matriarch Avenya," she replied, her voice low. "You have been observed," the matriarch said. "You were given time to find strength, to learn, to evolve. That time is now over." Riven glanced at Sayla, who looked as if the air had left her lungs. "This was all a test?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," the matriarch replied without looking at him. "We sent her to this world not to die, but to understand. She is the heir to our people, and our people are at a crossroads." More ships landed in the valley, their engines kicking up snow and debris. Alien soldiers emerged in precise formation, their armor black and red, their movements silent and trained. At the front of the group stood a tall figure, heavy with battle, scars and power. His name echoed in Sayla's mind before he even spoke. "Commander Draven." "You disappoint us again," he said, his voice like metal scraping stone. "You were supposed to return stronger. Instead, We find you hiding among primitives." Riven stepped in front of her. "Careful," he said simply. "You're on our land." Draven ignored him. "Do you still refuse to fight?" he asked Sayla. "Have you learned nothing?" "I've learned everything," Sayla said. Her voice didn't tremble. "And I'm ready to prove it," he scoffed. "Then let's see your strength." But Sayla didn't raise her fists. She didn't summon weapons. She did something far more dangerous in their world. She walked forward and dropped her weapons onto the snowy ground. "I won't fight to prove I'm worthy," she said. "I'll show you another kind of strength." The soldiers around her shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. Sayla turned to them, lifting her chin. "You follow orders. You fight wars. You bleed, and for what? Power? Fear? I lived in fear. I was taught that mercy makes you weak. But here," she looked back at Riven, "I learned that mercy takes more courage than any weapon ever could." Draven stepped forward, towering over her. "You think kindness will win a war?" "I think kindness will stop one before it starts," she said. He raised his weapon, pointing it at her chest. "One order from me and this world burns. Your human friend dies. Your test ends in failure." Sayla didn't move. "Then do it," she said. "Prove that fear is all you have left." Behind her, Riven watched the soldiers. They weren't as still as before. Some were looking at each other, uncertain. A few were lowering their weapons slightly. "You're afraid," Sayla continued, her voice calm but steady. "Afraid that if your soldiers see another way, they'll choose it, and you'll lose control." Draven's eyes narrowed. "You know nothing of leadership." "No," she said, "but I know what it feels like to be safe. For the first time in my life, I felt that here. Not because someone protected me with strength, but because someone saw me as something more than a weapon." Riven stepped forward then, joining her. "You want to test her?" he said. "Then test us both. But don't expect violence, you'll only get resistance of a different kind." The matriarch's hologram flickered, watching all of this unfold. "If you succeed, Sayla," she said, "you'll not only earn your place, you'll reshape the future of our people. But if you fail, your world will be lost." Sayla turned to Riven. "Do you believe in me?" "I do," he said. "Always." Then, she reached into her pouch and pulled out a small glowing device. "This is a neural shard," she said to the soldiers. "If you want to understand what I've seen, what I've learned, touch it, feel it for yourselves." One soldier stepped forward, then another, and another. As each touched the shard, their faces changed, not dramatically, but enough. A softening of the eyes, a slow breath, a new understanding. Draven growled, backing away. "This is a trick." "It's truth," Sayla replied. "You just don't like what it reveals." The wind picked up, swirling snow around them. But for the first time since the ships arrived, no one moved to fire a weapon. A quiet storm had begun. A storm not of destruction, but of change. One that couldn't be stopped with fear, only met with courage. And Sayla was ready to stand in the center of it. Snow continued to fall, gentle now, like the sky had decided to breathe again. The clearing where the alien ships had landed felt different, softer, warmer. It wasn't because of the fire Riven had rebuilt, or the sun beginning to push through the clouds. It was because something had changed. The soldiers who had once stood, like statues, were now exchanging looks, whispering quietly, some even glancing towards Sayla with something like hope. Sayla stood at the center of it all, her shoulders back, her armor still glowing faintly. She had offered her people a choice: feel what she had felt, experience the strength she had found, not through war, but through compassion. And they had responded. Not all, not yet, but enough to matter, enough to make Draven nervous. He hadn't moved. His weapon still hung in his hand, his jaw tight. He wasn't used to silence. He was used to commands being followed without hesitation. But now, his soldiers weren't looking to him for orders. They were looking at Sayla. You think healing a few old wounds will undo centuries of discipline? Draven growled, finally breaking the silence. They're soldiers, warriors, not healers, not caretakers. They can be both, Sayla said calmly. Strength isn't one thing, Commander. It's the ability to protect without harming, to lead without fear, to love without control. Draven lifted his weapon, this time aiming not at her, but at the small device Sayla had used to share her memories, the neural shard. Then let's see what your love is worth. He fired. The blast cracked through the air like thunder, but before it could hit the device, Riven leapt forward, shielding it with his body. The beam struck his shoulder, spinning him backward into the snow. Shouts rang out. Some soldiers moved toward Draven. Others froze in shock. Sayla screamed his name and ran to his side. Riven groaned, eyes squeezed shut, breath coming in gasps. The wound wasn't fatal, but it burned deep and blood was already soaking through his jacket. Still standing, he managed to say with a crooked smile. Sayla cradled him gently, one hand glowing with healing energy. Why would you do that? She whispered. Because they need to see it, he said, his voice fading. Real strength, real choice, not fear. More soldiers stepped forward now, forming a quiet circle around the scene. Draven looked uncertain for the first time. His grip on his weapon loosened. One of his lieutenants took a slow step toward him. You fired on an unarmed man, the young soldier said. You call that strength? I call it necessary, Draven snapped. I call it weakness, the soldier replied. A shift happened then. Not loud or dramatic, but firm and irreversible. Several soldiers turned away from Draven and walked toward Sayla. One knelt beside her, offering a small vial of healing serum. Another reached out to support Riven's back as Sayla worked. The silence was no longer tense, it was respectful. Draven looked around and saw something he couldn't fight with weapons. Understanding. His army was no longer his. Sayla stood, slowly, her hands still shaking. It's over, Commander. Not because we beat you, but because your power only ever came from fear, and fear has no place here. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked back to his ship alone, a warrior defeated not by battle but by the truth he could no longer ignore. Later, when the healing was done and the soldiers had returned to their ships in peace, Sayla and Riven sat together on the edge of the clearing. The snow had stopped, and the stars were beginning to appear above them, tiny and endless. I never thought it would work, she admitted. I thought they'd laugh or ignore me or worse. You didn't just speak, Riven said. You showed them. She smiled gently, brushing a hand along his bandaged shoulder. You showed them too. You stood in the way of a weapon, for me. I'd do it again, he said, but next time maybe with better armor. They both laughed softly. 6 months later, Earth signed a treaty with Sayla's people. Not one written in fear or written to avoid war, but a true alliance, one built on mutual respect. Shared knowledge, shared strength. Sayla became a leader, not through combat, but through choice. Her people began to change, slowly at first, but surely. Healing stations replaced training grounds. Empathy became a lesson in their schools. And Riven? He stood at Sayla's side through it all. A wilderness guide who had once just wanted peace now helped guide an entire planet into a new future. Not by force, not by command, but by simply being willing to believe in someone when no one else would. One quiet evening, they returned to the clearing where they had first met. The escape pod was long gone, the crater overgrown with moss and flowers. Riven took her hand and said, "This is where the story started. Do you ever wonder how it ends?" Sayla looked up at the stars, her smile soft and sure. "It doesn't end," she said. "It just changes." Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever. And in the quiet space between the trees, the light they chose together shined stronger than any storm that had ever come before.